Hello my friends and welcome. My name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. So here we have the actual satellite images of the Morozovsk Russian airplane, which is located in Rostov Oblast. I already told you about the Ukrainian strike on that airfield, but here we have a real evidence satellite images. Unfortunately, there is also a downside of this attack. Actually, I was sure that all of the airfield was just demolished based on the information I had that Ukraine launched more than 70 drones to hit the most of the jets which were staying on the apron. Just to remind you, it is one of the biggest bases for the Russian Su-34s fighters bombers. Russia uses those airplanes to carry the gliding bombs. There is some certain damage on the apron, so here we have the zoomed in image. Definitely there were some of the strikes, but there are no any signs of the Russian airplanes. It means that Russia had received the information about the Ukrainian strike before the strike itself was committed. The same picture we see on this apron, the signs of the strike before there were many of the airplanes. So before and after, again before and after. Since there are no any debris on the airplanes lying on the apron, it means that they were commanded to leave the airfield before the strike. 100%. It also means that there is a rat or many rats in Ukrainian military command. The Russian intelligence knows the steps of the Ukrainian army. For this same reason, probably they are reinforcing the defense of the Crimean Kerch Bridge. Unfortunately, they receive quite a reliable data from what we may judge. So this Ukrainian strike could have been the most devastating for the Russian aviation since the beginning of the war, because in this small apron alone you might spot 5 of the fighter jets or fighter bombers, Su-34s, plus the same quantity or even more were staying on the main apron. However, Russia still lost a couple of their airplanes during the Ukrainian attack. It happened right in this hangar. Russia put a couple of the airplanes there for the maintenance purposes, so there was no possibility for them to take those jets out. How do we know it? Well, actually, if we zoom in the image, you might see the Russian fighter jets staying over here and over here too. Even the color of two of those areas is different. It's bluish gray, simply the color of the Russian fighter jets, so they lost 2 of those in the hangar. And obviously lots of the airfield infrastructure. Plus Russia will hesitate to use Morozovsk airfield in the nearby future. The airbase is close to Ukraine, so it was kind of busy with many of the flights. For this reason, I wouldn't say that the drone strike was not successful, but it could have been much more successful if Russia was unaware of the strike coming. So definitely Ukrainian intelligence should work on those leaks. My friends, if you want to support my job that I do daily on YouTube, you may also join my Patreon page. It is available with my personal link below, or you may just scan the QR code available on the screen. Thank you so much for your kind support on Patreon. You really help a lot with my job. Wow, such a big kaboom today happened in Saratov, Russian Federation. The big gas storage with a pipeline somehow just burst into the flames, and the Russian emergency services are still incapable to seize this fire. Locals report about the single kaboom, so yet we are not sure whether it was the drone strike or someone smoked at the wrong place. Alright, about the group of the Russian soldiers in Vovchansk, they're definitely trapped in the local factory. We have the confirmation about it, this time from the Russian sources. It happened not even yesterday. The situation is like that for already 5 days. Ukraine performed a counterattack, cutting the supplies for the Russian group in the factory. Russians went to the basements and now they're under the constant strikes of Ukrainian aviation, so Ukraine continued to use JDAMs, so gliding bombs. Russia is not even trying to reach the forces in the factory because of the Ukrainian resistance. But what our soldiers witnessed, that sometimes Russia is capable to deliver some of the supplies by drones. They drove fresh water, some food, and the bullets for Kalashnikov. It means that potentially Russians might stay there for quite a long time. Ukraine needs to find out a solution to cut the supplies fully for the Russian group, because leaving the Russian positions behind is kind of risky if you want to go further and take more quarters, liberate from the Russian occupiers. Some of my followers on Telegram compared the situation with Azovstal. Well guys, actually it's uncomparable. I mean the scale of the factory and Azovstal, well, it's totally different. But if we minimize the situation, it looks very similar. The Azovstal defenders actually did a great job defending the territory of the factory for such a long period of time, because Russian forces actually were trapped on the south, and there was no possibility for Russia to release the huge amount of their forces to be more successful in other parts of Donetsk Oblast. That very important town of Ruhledar and many more towns are still under Ukrainian control. But now this small group of Russians, I don't think that there are more than 100 soldiers, are keeping the Ukrainian army from the further advancement. And definitely we have the confirmation of this situation from the Maiko 73. Russians are just trapped in the factory. In general, the Kharkiv operation is the total failure for the Russian army. First of all, they have severe losses. Secondly, Ukraine now has the permission to use the Western-made weapons on the Russian territory, on the Russian bases, because Russia started this one more strike. And moreover, Putin doesn't want to occupy Kharkiv. Yesterday, as far as you remember, he mentioned the demands to start the peace negotiations with the Ukraine. He told about Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk regions, but he said nothing about Kharkiv and Kharkiv region. It means that Putin understands that there is no way for him to achieve his goal in Kharkiv region, occupying Kharkiv. No, this task is unreal, even for the second army in the world. In its turn, it means that all of the Russian soldiers who are losing their lives in this stupid operation in Kharkiv are doing that for literally nothing. Even for Putin, it is nothing. He is not interested to negotiate about Kharkiv. The Kharkiv city and the Kharkiv Oblast will stay Ukrainian, even in Putin's scenario. Well, obviously he would like to occupy Kharkiv, Kiev and all of the Ukraine, but he understands that the Russian army is struggling, and Russian army is just incapable to achieve its goals in Ukraine. Yes, sometimes they're taking the ground. By the way, today Ukraine also done some of the counterattacks, we're gonna speak about it later, but in general the Russian army is definitely suffering with the resources they currently have and with their stupid mid-waves attacks. If it continues for a while, Russia would be forced to announce a new massive mobilization of the Russian men, and they would have to produce lots of the new weaponry. Now Russia will struggle with that because new sanctions were applied on the Russian oil fleet, also the Russian economy in general, but Russia has some of the allies, for example, China, which might support Russia for a very long time. However, I still don't think that China will send weaponry, I mean lethal weaponry, to Russian Federation. I do not exclude it, but for now it's too risky for China to escalate. Listening to Putin yesterday, I understood that for him the war is for the war itself. He just follows his immeasurable goals in this war, which are impossible to achieve, and no one will talk with Putin over his demands. It also brings some thoughts that Russia might escalate using tactical nukes. Yes, it also might happen. However, for now, I don't think that Russia might use nukes. But in the future, this variant is possible. A peace summit on Ukraine has already been started in Switzerland. There are delegations from more than 90 countries, and also some of the organizations are presented as well, like for example, United Nations. Well, the good thing that the world continues to speak about Ukrainian topic. It still remains one of the most sensitive topics out there, and Ukraine, with the help of the other partners, was able to gather everyone involved. The bad thing about the meeting that there will be no any solution taken by all of those leaders. They'll just discuss. So it's the start of the long peace negotiations. Russia is not presented. They follow their own peace plan, which Putin announced yesterday, and China supports Russia, plus there is the group of the other countries that are not leaning to democracy, so they have a separate camp and separate ideas. So I do not see a close perspective for any sort of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, especially after what Putin said yesterday. Basically, Putin's peace plan means capitulation of Ukraine. So yeah, I wouldn't call this conference a totally useless one. We need to attract attention for Ukrainian topic, but there will be no real outcome. Unfortunately, at this moment, the recent G7 meeting was way more important for Ukrainian support, especially in a military way, and the G7 countries also applied extra sanctions on Russia. And finally, Saudi Arabia was presented on the peace conference. Before they stated that they are not willing to send their representatives, but it seems like they changed their mind. The chief of the Ukrainian president's office, Andriy Yermak, said that probably the next time Russia will be involved in peace talks, so there might be some sort of the meeting with the Russian officials. At the same time, he said that Ukraine will insist on its sovereign right over all of the Ukrainian territories, probably including Crimea. But previously in 2022, Ukraine agreed on the current status of Crimea. It happened during the initial part of the Ukrainian-Russian peace negotiations, which at first took place in Minsk and later on were moved to Istanbul. The papers were published by the New York Times. They are legit. Sorry guys, I wasn't able to find the English copy. I found one in Russian, but I may tell you what was mentioned there. By the way, it is the project that was signed. It's the negotiation plan, not the real document. This plan doesn't have a jurisdiction weight, so then Putin shows the papers with the signatures. Look, they signed this document. No, it's just a plan. So both sides agreed to exclude Crimea from the treaty, leaving it under the occupation of the Russian Federation, but without recognition of this by Ukraine, so current status quo. At the same time, they mentioned that two countries will continue to solve the issues related to Crimea in 15 years. So before there were the rumors about 7 years, well, actually 15. According to this plan, Ukraine offered never to join NATO or any other alliances which are unfriendly to Russia. Well, we understand that after all of these Budapest memorandums and other papers, that the only firm security guarantees are only in NATO alliance. It means that Russia afraid of this stuff a lot. Nevertheless, Russia is okay if Ukraine joins the European Union, but European Union, it is mostly political alliance and economical alliance. There is no joint EU military, and for example, countries like Austria, they are in the European Union, but at the same time they are outside the NATO alliance. Well, Austria may allow its military neutral policy because it's quite far away from Russia, but Ukraine is bordering Russia, so there is the constant threat from our neighbors to attack Ukraine. They might do it at any moment. That is why Ukraine needs robust security guarantees, only possible within NATO alliance. If you ask me, the European Union membership doesn't matter at all for Ukraine compared to NATO alliance. Well, probably you know my attitude towards Ukrainian European Union membership. I'm not a great supporter of that, but if people support that, I may also support. I think that majority should decide in the democratic way. Russia also demanded from Ukraine to make the Russian language as the official one, the second official language. Well, actually in Ukraine there are lots of the Russian speakers, and I'm the Russian speaker myself. And after Russia started this full-scale war against Ukraine, more and more people are choosing to speak Ukrainian. To separate completely from the Russian culture, but I continue to speak Russian because I speak Russian, it's my mother language. And here we go with the demand of the Russian side, which I think is absolutely not acceptable by Ukraine, but nevertheless the Ukrainian delegation put its signature under this plan. Russia had declared that they wanted to take Donetsk and Lugansk regions fully. It is similar to what Putin said yesterday. Now Russia wants Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblast also fully. So the appetite of Putin rises high, right? I think that Ukraine signed this plan just because Russian forces were very close to the capital city of Kiev and they occupied the vast territories of Ukraine by that time in 2022. But after a while, then Russia was kicked out from many of the places. Ukraine said, no, we're gonna fight, we're not gonna follow your demands. But what is actually happening on the warfield doesn't match with Putin's ambitions. The Russian army is still struggling with tremendous losses, taking just some of the villages or small towns under their control. There is no strategic movement from the Russian side. There is no breakthrough Ukrainian defense either. Plus, Ukraine gets constant supplies from our allies, so there is no perspective for the Russian army to break the situation fully into their favor in a nearby couple of years. Also, by that time, Russia demanded the demilitarization of Ukrainian army for it to shrink to less than 100,000 soldiers. I think one more reason why this document was perished because Ukraine wanted to obtain robust guarantees from our allies, and our allies said, no, you'll get just weaponry, not our forces on Ukrainian soil. And without those guarantees, I would compare them with NATO guarantees. Ukraine decided not to go into this trap, and actually I like that this document is gone. Chancellor Scholz also wants Russia to participate in the next peace summit, and actually, as I told you, it was confirmed by Ukrainian officials as well. Meanwhile, the head of the Russian parliament, Tolstoy, said that it was the last peace proposition from the Russian Federation. The next proposal will be a capitulation of Ukraine. Well, actually, it was already the capitulation proposal. There is nothing to talk with Russia about at this stage. Putin wants to continue this war. He has no will to stop it at all. Zelensky said that the concept of the peace plan will be developed during this summit. Later on, the proposal will be sent to Russia, and after the next peace summit, there will be the chance for the war to stop. Well, I wish I could be same optimistic. I already told you how this war could be stopped. First of all, with huge support, huge military support of Ukraine. With its great potential advantage, Ukraine might liberate its territories and immediately join NATO the next day, and Russia would hesitate to strike it once again. The other variant number 2, is to collapse the Russian government under the huge dramatic sanctions, mostly by our Western partners. The sanctions also should be applied on Chinese companies which now work with Russia, and we see the signs that yes, definitely United States and other allies are working in this sphere. Alright guys, to other news. New pictures show that Russia put some of the tires on the water right across the Kerch bridge. So actually they have 2 of the defense lines. One consists out of those barges, and the next defense line are those tires just floating. Definitely it could make the job for Ukrainian drone boats more difficult, but not impossible. Alright, so what is happening now on the front lines? You probably know that Ukraine intensified the strikes on the Russian military facilities in Crimea. By doing that, Ukraine is forcing Russia to concentrate their air defense in Peninsula, at the same time demolishing the same air defense. It is like a mousetrap for the Russian S-300s and S-400s. The more of those systems Russia put to Crimea, the more of them are demolished by Ukrainian ATACMS missiles, or Storm Shadow, and sometimes drones. This month alone, I counted that Russia lost 8 of the very expensive S-300 and S-400 systems. They even were forced to send S-500 systems with a wider range. We'll see how it works. Ukraine is oriented to hit the Russian air defense to give the way for the future F-16s, which should arrive very soon. Here I see that the move of the Ukrainian command is very smart, but Russia is just struggling protecting their bases. Alright, what happened today according to the recent update? Enemy retreated in 2 of the areas, one area in Serblansky forest. Let's check out the timeline, yesterday and today, so Russia left this place. It isn't really far from infamous for Russia Bilohorivka. They lost lots of the vehicles out there in 2022, and it's also not far away from Crimea. Plus, the enemy forces retreated from Kislivka village, so it was yesterday and it is today. Again, yesterday, today, it's the 3rd time already Ukraine liberates this village, or the remains of the village. So after all, Russia is not that successful in the Bakhmut region, and if Ukraine gets more military support, it is capable to withstand the ground and even counterattack. But at the same time, Russia moved towards Chasiv Yar, so it was yesterday and today they took this forest part under control. Also near Novoselivka Persia, you may see that the situation is kind of bad for the Ukrainian side, and here Russia moved with their attack just a little, but it's already the time for Ukrainian forces to withdraw from the place. Also, Russia continues with their standard assault vector near Yasnobrodivka. They took some ground there today as well, so yesterday and today they moved taking this field and the forest line. There is no doubt that Russia will occupy this area. So the most successful place for the Russian army is this area and also near Chasiv Yar, but still the movement is very slow. I don't think that Putin is in a position to put new demands for Ukraine or speaking about capitulation. No, his army is unable to achieve the victory for Russia. The only argument which Putin still has, as I say to you, are the tactical nukes. But at this stage, I don't see Putin using those in Ukrainian war. However, we are getting closer to that scenario because peace agreements are basically not helping, because for every side peace means totally different options, and because the current Russian army is basically incapable. We'll see how it goes in 2025. Russia took the T-62 tanks from the storages and now sent them to the front line. Those are the very old tanks, and usually they are being converted to the hangar tanks to withstand the drone strikes. But here we have even some tuning, the grille on the top. Again, Russia is using the strategy of the mid waves, using the very old tanks, but many more of those. That is the way they fight, so the mobilization in Russian army is absolutely imminent. Ukraine starts to obtain more artillery shells from our military allies, but still Russia is prevailing with their artillery shells numbers. Now the ratio is 1 to 5. So per each Ukrainian shell, Russia has 5 more, but the quality of the Russian shells are usually much worse. The same we may say about the precision of their artillery systems. The first package of the Czech initiative shells were delivered to Ukraine already, so little by little Ukraine gains resources. But we need more and more, which will allow Ukraine to counterattack and liberate its lands. But what Russia might do in a close perspective, they might cut this highway which connects Dnipro with Pokrovsk and the Chasiv Yar. They're definitely not far away from the very important crossroad. I already told you about it in my reviews, and now Bild comes with the same conclusion. But again, even if they would do so, it's not the strategic win for Russia. No, it's the tactical success. Yes, it would be harder for Ukraine, but there is also a bypass road that connects Pokrovsk and the Chasiv Yar. By cutting this road, Russia will not cut supplies for the Ukrainian group in this area completely. No. They might just slow down the supplements, that's it. Great news from the United States, they will allocate 1.5 billion United States dollars to support Ukrainian energy infrastructure. But to really protect it, we need more air defense systems, Patriots and missiles for them. Some of the interesting news are coming about a new Hungarian position over Ukrainian EU membership. Richard Yerzbek usually shares proved information, so here he says that Hungary is no longer blocking negotiation framework for Ukraine, and by extension Moldova. The compromise text agreed. Ukraine and Moldova now officially start European Union accession talk on 25th of June. But the final limit or the final date for those talks to happen is not stated. It means that those might continue for a very long time. So what's the compromise text which was agreed by Ukraine and Hungary? It's about the Hungarian community in Ukraine, so there are lots of the ethnical Hungarians who have Ukrainian passport. But with some of the controversial Ukrainian language laws, the Hungarians are not able to study in their own language in the schools, in government schools. Well, they might do it in the private schools, but probably they don't have it, or I don't know. Well, Hungary is now insisting to cancel it for Hungarian minorities. And it seems like Ukraine agreed on that to reach its goal. The Hungarian foreign minister confirms that the compromise with Ukraine was found. So there are no obstacles for Ukrainian EU membership negotiations. And here for a moment I want to go back to the Swiss topic. On the picture you may see a warrior of Ukrainian army, actually a volunteer who came to fight for Ukraine back in beginning of 2022, right after Russia started this full-scale war. The name of the guy is Jona Neidhardt. He is originally from Zurich, Switzerland. And right before the peace meeting he came to Switzerland, and as a local media reporter he was arrested. Actually he went to police himself for the self-arrest, let's say. According to the Swiss law, it's forbidden for the citizens to take part in military actions for the other countries. And here Jona, who is 36 years old, obviously violated this federal law. So obviously he'll be under the trial and he could face several years in prison. but he did it for a purpose. He wants to raise the attention of the world for Ukrainian topic and why is it important to support Ukraine. He was fighting in Kharkiv region during the successful counterattack of Ukrainian army, and later on he was defending Ukraine in Luhansk region and also in Bakhmut. So this guy, as for me, is really a hero. He's not deserving any sort of the prison sentence. Hopefully he will not face that kind of the sentence. He is 36 years old and was working as a high school teacher, but probably he went through the Swiss military training before. And now, my friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.